Good morning and welcome to blackusa.news. My name is Donnie Glover, and we have the distinct pleasure of having with us today a longtime journalist, longtime politico, longtime friend, and she will not hesitate to swing on me if the situation should call for it. But thank God she hasn't swung on me at least in 20 years that I recall. Catalina Byrd, good morning.
Good morning, Donnie. How are you?
Catalina, we had a tragedy over the weekend. Former Miss America jumped from a building, and I saw you tweeted something regarding mental health, young people, and the threat of suicide in our society, particularly amidst the pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, it was just last week or about a week and a half ago. It was Regina King's son, Ian, that committed suicide. He was only 26. Um, Everything said that his music and production career was getting ready to take off to include his last post. And so just with these young people is I personally lost a friend to suicide about a month after we were in shelter in place, very early in the pandemic in April 2020. And he too was young. And then, it seems like it's just becoming more and more frequent with young people 30 and under. And just pray for their families and whatever the spirit is to please be lifted off of their generation.
We also have a lot of murder going on here in the city of Baltimore. You have seen this up close. You've lost loved ones.
I have. Um, I wish I could say that was indicative of the pandemic, but unfortunately, that's a problem that Baltimore has been facing for quite some time. We've had different approaches to what to do to reduce that number. I don't believe them to have all been effective, or perhaps even some of the ones that could have been effective weren't allowed to run their course by virtue of changes of administrations. But that too, on top of everything else that's pandemic induced, is something else that we're dealing with. Absolutely.
You wanted to be mayor at one point.
At 2 points in 2011 and 2020, I did, and
Why?
um,
Why?
because I believe I have a skill set and the ability to think outside the box that would have given us uh, some different approaches to not just crime but our homelessness, uh, a lot of fraud, all kinds of things that go on that have become on brand for Baltimore, as some people would say. But I think that we are bigger than the wire, and I think that we're bigger than being the place where nobody's shocked when something crazy happens. In fact, I know that to be true, and I wanted the opportunity to create that new narrative for us on behalf of all of us.
If you were the mayor, say you were the mayor today,
If
how
I
would you
was the
start?
mayor, if I was the mayor today, I would I would be working more closely with the FBI, I believe, as well as the governor's office in terms of crime fighting strategy. I think that we glorify one and two arrests or gun seizures more too much, and we don't do enough digging into the theology or the psychology of the people committing the crimes. And as a result of which, we're not preventing crime because we take one illegal gun off the street, because there are five there to replace it. The question is, what makes the person holding the gun so desensitized to their own humanity and that of others that they would take someone else's life? And working with those individuals, I think we need social workers in homes and in schools, so we can identify patterns of abuse and patterns of neglect that lead to these dehumanizing feelings that allow people to become more violent. I just think it needs to be a more holistic approach to the entire thing, and not just guns off the street, drugs off the street, lock them up, lock them up, lock them up. Putting an animal in a cage doesn't do anything but make it more visceral.
Not long ago, you gave me a ride home. We left darker than blue, and you dropped me at the corner of Pennsylvania and Lawrence. What did you see?
That time of night is people standing outside Legends. It's the only thing open. Still an open air drug market, despite the police presence that sits directly across the street at the subway station. Pennsylvania and Lawrence is one of the more busy in the corners in our community here in 21217. But I saw what I see when I drive past every day. You know, young people in need of jobs that probably have barriers to being employed. Um, as well as the fact that they've lost faith in the fact that they're going to be actually supported if they try and straighten their lives up. And so, you know, what I saw was what I see every day is a community in need of some hope.
Who's failed them first?
I think that happened before I was even born, to be honest.
So they were born victims.
This particular generation, unfortunately, so I believe so. These kids are the children of people who came from under mandatory minimums, more than likely had one or more parents missing out of their home. And so when you allow repeat traumas to happen to a person before you ever even begin to attempt to address them, this is the outcome. It is that needs very much a greater level of understanding and support services that I don't believe that we give or that we take into account, unfortunately.
You know the mayor.
Say that again.
You know the mayor.
You don't have any audio. Are you on mute?
No, you had a call come in. I think it broke the connection we had. Go out, come back in.
Okay.
We're talking with Catalina Byrd here. Got a couple of comments here. My last question to her were the young people born victims, and Mr. Honolulu, who comes on at 10 a.m. with the morning show, says we are born victimized in America. More work has to be done to stop the attacks. This is what Mr. Honolulu wrote in response to, are these young people born victims? We're born victimized in America. More work has to be done to stop the attacks.
I'm assuming by we he means that of us as
Black
people of
people.
color. Yeah, and I would agree with that to an extent, but also the environment. It's that argument of nature versus nurture. And so, you know, I was born Black in America, but I've had a series of wonderful experiences that have allowed my trauma to be minimized. I try to do that for my children, but that's because of the value of the nurture aspect and how I was raised and who I was raised by and what I was exposed to, that all children, and especially Black children, don't get to have. And if the village was a village again and a community acted as like a village and we supported each other in our shortcomings, I think that could be true for more Black children. It's just that we've become so isolated and individualized that we don't see the benefit for ourselves in helping someone else. And that's really and that in itself could be a trauma response from having been, you know, treated so poorly for so long, even by our own peers. But I absolutely believe that if we got back to the village mentality, then that wouldn't have to be true for so many Black children.
Now, see, when I asked you who is responsible for these young people, I expected to hear the parents.
The parents aren't equipped to be parents. The parents themselves have trauma. And that's why I say it happened before we were born. It's a culmination of the disintegration of the family, the disintegration of the church, the disintegration of transparency and trust in our administrations, and maybe even some integrity issues, depending on which administration you take a microscope to. But all of those things combined is what makes an entire generation behind the eight ball, if you ask me. We've all failed. It happened in administrations prior to my birth. It happened in in the breakdown of the Black church. It happened in the breakdown of the Black family. And we're now living with the byproduct of all of these breakdowns at once.
Michael Randolph writes, to understand violence, you have to understand intergenerational trauma. I understand intergenerational trauma. I also understand that I was not raised to be a victim. I was raised to be a victor, regardless of the circumstances. And so when I see this about the intergenerational trauma, what also comes to mind is not just Black America, but Africa.
I think that we believe that we own trauma. I think that trauma is indicative only of our community and our people, and that's not the case.
It's in
And so
Asia. It's across Europe.
it is, and and it's multi-generational. I too, like yourself, wasn't raised to be a victim. I was raised to be not just a victor, but to also be empathetic to those who are victims and to not see them as less. I think we've gotten so comfortable judging other people when their shortcomings aren't the same as our own, and then we glorify, where we're not flawed, as though that means that we don't have any, and that is the beginning of the dehumanization that ultimately can spiral and allow you to take someone else's life. If we're honest with ourselves, if you feel comfortable enough to be judging someone else and how they respond to their traumas, what they do, you've already started down the wrong path, because you've already decided that you are more human or of more value as a human than they are. It's a slippery slope.
I'm glad you say that, because I was also raised a Democrat. And when I look at the history of Baltimore, a 9-1 Democratic city, it's been all Democrats.
Yes. I think in terms of...
And they point fingers at Republicans. You dirty rats.
They point fingers at Republicans. We don't teach civics in school. They know that there are at least 4 generations that have never seen a two-party system at work in Baltimore City. They've only ever seen Democrats lead, and don't see the error in that. And so they believe them when they attack Republicans for things that are very much their own doing. They also point fingers at each other, especially during primaries, as we're getting ready to be in, going into June. It's always been fascinating to me how in the primary they point fingers at each other and act as though they are truly, truly different. And then after the primary, if the Republican opponent has any validity to it, they galvanize and come back together as though we and the people are supposed to forget that they were at each other's throats 90 days prior, that they disagreed with everything that came out of the other person's mouth. But now we have to unite behind the blue for the greater good of all people. And it's never made sense to me. Or how they get away with it doesn't make sense to me. And yet and still, that's where we are.
Now, for the sake of clarity, while you are a registered Republican, I don't see you as a Trump Republican. Am I correct?
You're correct. I was not a Trump Republican. In 2016, I voted for Gary Johnson, who was the Libertarian candidate. He ran in 2012 as well, former governor of Nevada, I believe, or New Mexico. In 2020, it made a lot of people laugh, but I really did vote for Kanye West. But it's not because I'm a fan of Kanye's music, which I am. But he also had a platform that was really, really similar to my own that didn't get covered as widely as it could have. But Forbes did do a really nice in-depth article on what his actual plans were. And that I felt more comfortable voting for him than anything that the Republicans or the Democrats had offered me.
You would call that a protest vote?
No, when my mother writes in herself, I call that a protest vote, especially when she knows that she's not on the ballot in her state or any other one. Maryland just wasn't a state that allowed Kanye to be on the ballot. He was on the ballot in, I believe, 12 other states. So he was an actual candidate. I don't see it as a protest vote. I see it as the vote for the person that I believed had was thinking outside of the box and had the capacity to help jump in on day one or in the first 100 days, as we say, and take on the multiple challenges that we have as a nation at one time.
Could you be dubbed the Marianne Williamson of the Republican Party? Marianne Williamson, she ran for.
I don't think so. Isn't that the lady that was Oprah's life coach or something? Isn't she like the white Ayanna Van Zandt? She's like a yoga instructor slash
You still there?
life. I'm here.
Oh.
Isn't she Oprah's life coach?
I don't know. I know she wrote an incredible poem called Our Deepest Fear. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. She also didn't have a snowball's chance in winning the nomination, but she is quite the humanitarian. She's always calling the party on the carpet.
I
She's
when
a
I
humanist.
first heard of her, it was from a mutual friend, Joe Carter, who was a huge fan of hers. And so, yes, I do see her as being a humanitarian. I think she didn't stand a snowball's chance because she didn't have any connection to policy. And so, when I look at a candidate, I need to know that on day one, they're going to be able to follow the conversation happening in the room. They're going to be able to contribute to it and do things that are going to begin to take course corrective action, be it for the city, the state, or the country. I did not get that from her.
I must tell you that I'm a tad frustrated. I'm about to, well, I published it yesterday. It's called Things to Consider Before Running for Office in Maryland If You're Black. I am so tired of people, they win a seat, and then they sound like the last guy or the last girl in that position. When they're running for a position, they're very critical of this position. You should have did this. You should have did that. And then they get in there and do the exact same thing. They start taking the same positions. I'm not responsible for this. That happened way before me. We're going to fix it in about 5 to 7 years. I'm so sick of it. Don't run for office if you're going to get in there and tell me to do your job.
I do find it disheartening when someone runs as though they're going to be different than the status quo and then gets in office and becomes a parrot of the status quo. I share that sentiment wholeheartedly. What's even more disheartening is watching people get broken into being part of the status quo, that ran on something, that tried to stand for something and get punished for it, either in their community, inside their party, or just by virtue of their own supporters. Like, oh, you knew this was the game when you signed up for it. You knew you had to do X, Y, and Z before you could get to A, B, C. And we see it.
I think basic values still withstand the test of time. Don't lie, don't steal, honor your word. If you're going to do something, do it. If you can't, then call that person up and tell them. But we're now in this new virtual reality where social media is more important than me honoring my word.
Yes, that has become the case because it's not about actual impact anymore. It's about likes and shares and being viral. And we've equated that to success, unfortunately.
Case in point, 3 firefighters got killed And damn if it's not like crickets when it comes to vacant houses.
There's a lot more to that. Like,
Okay.
that same exact house where those firefighters lost their lives had been on fire in 2015, and 3 firefighters were injured. Thankfully, they didn't lose their lives, but it's not just about blighted houses. It's about the penalties we don't take against the people who own those houses that create these conditions. Over $90,000 in fines to who owned it is not going to do anything for the families of those firefighters who they'll never walk through the front door again.
Well, isn't this a great time to enact something such that that kind of thing never happens again? Or is it, I wish something else happened so this would go away?
I don't think it's either. I never lean towards knee-jerk reactions because of emotionalism. I don't think doing something that we should have been doing because 3 people lost their lives is the best way to go about it.
Don't do anything?
I'm not going to say don't do anything, but I think that what we do needs to be strategic. I don't think it needs to be driven by emotionalism.
Shouldn't it start now?
It should have started 10 years ago.
Yeah, but we are here today. What will we do today?
We need to look at the leadership inside of the fire department.
Oh my God, it's a big loop. We sounding like them now.
It's not a big loop. What do you think could be done today if we don't start with the leadership? If we don't have the right chief of the fire department, then any policy that's enacted won't be carried out effectively or correctly.
It involves more than just the fire department. A vacant house involves at least 5 departments.
Absolutely.
The police, the fire department, DPW, who boards up the houses, even to the extent that they face getting stabbed by drug dealers or drug addicts. And then there's also the Housing Authority of Baltimore City and the Department of Housing and Community Development. There should be a list. If it's 16,000, it's not that many. Get 4 people, split it up. You got 4,000, you got 4, you got 4, I got 4. And start cross-referencing these properties. The big thing seems to be the receivership, that these properties, once they are seized, it takes about 2 years for the properties to fall under the city control. And then you're waiting on some master plan in whatever community as to whether to knock them down or to keep them.
Well, it's not just that. It's not just that. Also, oftentimes we as the city have redeemed ownership of the property, but not the ground rent. Baltimore is still one of the only cities in the country that still has ground rent. And it's funny because in 2010, the very first time I ever ran for office, it was for judge of the Orphans Court. And this was a big part of my platform. A majority of our blight in Baltimore City is unclaimed air property, because we haven't taught generational wealth, because we haven't taught financial literacy. So some of these things are properties that could be asset growing for a family that just didn't understand the estate process. Who's
going to teach people that?
Well, I credit Marco Merrick when he worked in the clerk of the court's office in the Register of Wills. They did a great job bringing the orphans court judges to senior centers and other things to teach about estate planning. It's 3 documents that everybody, especially if you have children, but even if you don't, should have, which is a last will and testament, a living will, and a power of attorney. Know where what you've worked for is going and have a plan for it, and allow that to be your next generation. You have children, just as I do. Allow what you've built and what you've worked for to be something that they inherit that makes them not have to work as hard as we did to get the next leg up.
What are those 3 items again?
A last will and testament, a living will, and a power of attorney. Your living will is also known as a medical directive, where if you were incapacitated from making decisions for yourself, that you've named someone to do so that you trust.
And who can handle that for us?
You can do it yourself online and have it notarized, and file it with the Register of Wills. If you have an attorney that you already use, your attorney can do it. But these are such standard documents at this time that you can actually do it yourself online and then take it, have it notarized, and register it with the Register of Wills.
Got a governor's race going on.
That we do.
Who's catching your eye?
No one. It feels a lot. It feels a lot like 2014 all over again in my spirit.
How so?
I see everybody Black being pushed towards the Black candidate, and for no other reason than being Black.
Is that Rashawn Baker?
No, that would be Wes Moore. I forgot Rashawn is running. Rashawn runs a lot. I think that he's become invisible to me at this point, because he's kind of like the Frank Conway Sr. of statewide politics. He just keeps doing it regardless. Maybe he just enjoys it. I know Frank did. Frank didn't care about winning. Frank had fun.
Oh, he won.
Oh, Frank won for clerk. Frank never won for mayor, but he was fun
also
being
a delegate
in the discussion. He had fun being in the discussion and making people uncomfortable, and I appreciated and respected that about him a great deal. He never went quietly into the night.
That's a part of my article too, how we don't have a boss. We don't have bosses in our Black political world here in Baltimore, here in Maryland. We've lost the bosses. Pete Rollins gone. Clarence Blount gone. Bob Clay gone. I personally see Bob Clay as a political boss, but those elected officials, I don't know that we have a Joan Carter Conway as no longer in politics as an elected official. Who's our boss? Who do we look to? Is it Jill Carter?
I don't think that we have a boss, but also the people that you named didn't groom successors, right?
I'll write about that. How Smoke, after 12 years of Smoke, we did not pass the ball to the next Black mayor.
We don't pass the ball to anyone for fear of not being relevant. We want everybody to have to cross our threshold to get where they're going. And that individualism is a form of narcissism, if you ask me, right? And I think about people I've reached out to early on in my career that I wanted to learn from, that had conditions to my access to them, not for anything that was expedient to the work that they were doing or policy, but ego. If you're not willing to kiss the ring, as they say, then there's things that they're not going to teach you. There's things that they're not going to share with you. It's just similar to what we were talking about with the blight and the air property. You've got to pass down what you've learned. One of the very first lessons that you taught me is that you have to master one thing at a time, and you need to always be looking behind you for who to share that with that's going to come up behind you and need this information, to be always teaching while you're learning at the same time. That's not how we've groomed our politicians, especially those that represent our community, to be. They believe that it's a zero-sum game, and that they have to be the man, or all hope is lost for the community. And that's a reality. That is a version of reality that I don't believe to be true, but we've allowed to continue to be perpetuated.
You've been on Square Off with Richard Sher. You've been on national TV. You've hosted the Roland Martin Show. Catalina, when I watch the news in the morning, I'm sick to my stomach. I'm sick to my stomach when I watch the Fugitive Slave Report on Fox. I'm sick to my stomach when I see Black television hosts saying all kinds of mean things about Black people. Where is the responsibility in Black journalists? Because quite often, too often, I see journalists that may as well be white or anything else but Black. I just expect, that's why I was trained, that we as Black journalists have a responsibility to put our people in the best light. I was talking with Armstrong Williams this morning briefly before he went on air, and I asked him about Fox's Fugitive Slave Report. Are there any whites who are wanted in the state of Maryland, or are all of them black?
Well, let's start with the fact that we're not going to use the word journalist that loosely, right? So something very, very distinct happened in 2008 beyond the election of Barack Obama as president, is that all these mainstream media outlets looked up and realized they ain't have any black folks, or they only had one or two. And they allowed popular black people, not journalists, popular black people with followings that could add to their ratings, to come on air and pretend to be journalists.
I
There's no
don't see it.
reason.
I don't see an NFL football player as a journalist unless you didn't put your,
I don't
put
see
in
Michael
time.
Eric Dyson. I don't see Michael Eric Dyson as a journalist.
Who?
Michael Eric Dyson.
Is
Before
that the guy that was
2000,
talking about Dr. King?
I try not to listen to anything MED says, but he might have been. It wouldn't have been far off. But prior to
Shame on
2008,
him. I couldn't believe he would say something mean about our hero. What has he ever done?
he's a hip hop biographer that teaches about the life of Biggie and Tupac at Georgetown and wrote some books. But when we had to
I've
black up
never seen him in the
mainstream
streets of
media,
Baltimore. I don't know him.
when we had to black up mainstream media, we were, I mean, I remember looking up, and Torre, who had been a music journalist and worked for Rolling Stone, was on a daily show on MSNBC. We didn't, but we as black people didn't cry out and say, these aren't our journalists, these aren't the Gwen Eiffels, these aren't the Donnie Glovers that should be on the air and should be speaking on behalf of our community or to our community. We allowed the popular black person, and you remember all of this time social media has grown. So what makes someone popular isn't their intellect, it isn't a body of work to stand on. It's followers. It's going viral at this point. We
I'm,
allowed popular people to replace journalism.
I'm glad you said that. I wanted to welcome you to the world of Facebook jail. People may not know this, but I have a life sentence. My entire account was blocked. Had over 200,000 followers, but yet this scourge of a miscreant named Donald John Trump, why, this guy can actually run for president again. Is Facebook racist?
I think that the people who wrote the algorithm are oblivious to the blind spots that allow it to target. Because I'd never been in Facebook jail
You say
until,
oblivious, so you're going to give them a pass? They're not racist. They're just oblivious.
yeah, in terms of how algorithms work and coding works, I think that they're oblivious to where those blind spots are created.
I'm not. I don't believe. I'm not buying it. That's like if I keep going to the corner getting stuck up, I'm saying, oh, they just got a tendency to pull out guns for anybody that come to the corner.
And you might not be wrong about that. But
or like Martin O'Malley with zero tolerance. Even though they locking up everybody, those people committed a crime. I'm supposed to believe that, sitting on their own steps.
no, now we know that what zero tolerance did was far from was far from okay. But I'd never been in Facebook jail until Donald Trump got banned from Twitter. Right? I'd been on Facebook for over 10 years, never had a problem. My issue is that when we champion censorship, the other side of the pendulum is that's going to swing back, and we're going to be the ones that are going to get bludgeoned with it the most. So I'm never for censorship. I think Donald Trump should be able to say whatever he wants to say, and be held accountable to that. But blocking where he can
But see,
say
that's
it,
the part. That's the part there. It seems as though America, that's my Anthony Brown, has a problem making people accountable.
we do.
White people in particular, don't want to be accountable.
I don't think at the core anybody wants to be accountable, black or white. I think that That is
Did your dad allow you to be unaccountable?
no,
Did your mom allow you to forego being accountable for your actions?
no. But when I was a child, it didn't stop me from trying.
But there were repercussions.
Absolutely.
Donald John Trump should have gotten his ass whipped as a child. Somebody failed to correct that young boy.
Maybe his parents were practicing what so many of my friends are now, and what they call gentle parenting, and you don't raise your voice or strike a child, and you
I'm with
allow.
Bernie Mac. I'm with Bernie Mac. Bust a move.
I too am not a parent that believes in gentle parenting, but I respect everybody's wishes to parent the way that they see fit. It
Your
doesn't
son,
work for
your son.
me.
Let's just go there. Where's your oldest son right now?
He's in his first semester of college in Richmond at VCU.
Congratulations, Catalina.
Thank you.
That's humongous. That's huge. It's astronomical. It should be the norm. I'm not surprised, but considering all that we've gone through, I mean, quite frankly, you and I have seen enough in the past 30 years. We've lost countless people. Then you throw the pandemic on top of it. I mean, truth be told, how old are you? Like 25, 30?
40. Thank you very much.
At 40, you're an elder.
You know, Jill said that to me a few months ago, and I hung up on her. We're live, so I can't hang up on you, but I'm not really ready to receive that yet. I think I'm part of a bridge generation where I'm not a millennial, but I'm not an elder just yet either. I'm about 10 years removed from both sides.
You've done national television. You've ran for mayor. You've assisted candidates. You've done more than most people have at 40 in your profession. I mean, a lot of times we look up and, they'll tell us to celebrate like April Ryan, but I see you here in the streets of Baltimore. Her job is over there at the White House, but I see you having a pretty good understanding of national politics as well. For instance, how's Joe Biden doing?
I think that Joe would have been better served had he not been talked out of running in 2016, that it would have been a different climate. He would have been able to accomplish more. I think this is going to be a one-term presidency that not a lot comes out of. And it's unfortunate because he definitely has a statesman's career, but this will end up being his legacy. The president that followed Trump couldn't make America all sing Kumbaya.
Mm-hmm. Mexico, Texas, are you concerned about the border, immigration?
No, but I've never been concerned about the border or immigration because I am a believer in the words of the French poem that's on the Statue of Liberty, that we are supposed to give us our poor and your weak. We're supposed to be a place of safe haven for anyone else in the world that wants to come here. That's what being the greatest nation is about. And
the one problem I got with Mexico is a lot of cocaine come through there, right?
Coming from Central America, yeah.
A lot of cocaine come through there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Tony Montana, right? A lot of money, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why don't people take some of that money and build their own community up?
I can't speak to the ethos of cartels. That's probably the one thing in my career I've not had access to.
Afghanistan. What's the number one product in Afghanistan?
Dope.
Heroin. But last night they're running a special about people in Afghanistan freezing through the winter. Time out. You got all of the heroin in the world and you cold. It is not
the people, but let's not make the mistake of believing that the people who live there have access to the resources that come from there.
But you're protecting the people who do.
But the people with the resources that make the money aren't hands-on with the general public. I mean, that's like saying, we have a large amount of wealth in the state of Maryland. We also have homeless children. We have homeless veterans. Nobody's going to Montgomery County and knocking on anybody's door and saying, why aren't you doing more for what's happening in West Baltimore?
Well, if you're black and you're a Democrat and you go to Montgomery County talking about Baltimore City, they'll tell you what some of those Montgomery County delegates told me 15, 20 years ago. Why does Baltimore need so much? I will tell you that those Democrats in Montgomery County are as about connected to black people in Baltimore as Donald Trump.
I know some black folks that live in Reservoir Hill that have amassed their own wealth that are about as connected as Donald J. Trump as well.
Is that why the young people that live around Dorothy Height Elementary, this new state-of-the-art 21st century school, are not allowed to use the recreation facilities?
Oh, there is no recreation facility. When they tore down John Eager Howard, they didn't rebuild the rec center. Miss Cookie had been in that rec center for over 30 years. She knew every child in the community. She knew which child was going through a homelessness situation or destabilization in their home. She allowed the rec to be safe haven. They didn't rebuild the rec center when they built Dorothy Height.
I mean, you got Marilyn and Nick Mosby that live not far from there. You got James Torrance right there. But this happened before.
I'm about to say, none of them were a factor when it happened. What I remember
Let's
from
see, who was?
Kathy
P was a state senator for the 40th district.
She was. Catherine was our state senator. And I'm trying to remember who came before.
Ralph Hughes was the state senator before her.
Nick Mosby was our city council person when it became time to negotiate the opening of Dorothy Height. But it escapes me who, it might have been Belinda. I think Nick took Belinda's council seat, if I'm not mistaken. So Belinda would have been the council person when these things were originally starting to be discussed. But there is no rec center at Dorothy Height, like as there was in John Eager Howard. So it's not that the people can't use it. It doesn't exist. They didn't prioritize rebuilding it.
You mean we garnered $15 billion through the Maryland State Lottery, but we put a brand new state-of-the-art school in that doesn't have recreation facilities for the young people in the community? Here in Sandtown, we had 3 elementary schools. Then we were down to 2, and then we were down to 1. At Freddie Gray, 2015, we had 2. Now we're down to 1. They're talking about reopening one, but I don't understand how you have black people on the Baltimore City School Board making these decisions for other black people. So I wanted to ask you about classism. Have you experienced classism in the black community?
Yes, and colorism. We have every ism inside of our own community, and that's one of the reasons that
light skin, dark skin.
Absolutely.
Oh
my. Sexism, classism, and colorism are the 3 greatest isms, and I'd even go so far as to add ageism. You and I attended a funeral together a few weeks ago where the pastor giving the eulogy has been on Fox, speaking ill of the mayor and everyone in the city council because of the age difference.
Speaking ill of West Baltimore, you better check yourself.
And West Baltimore, but it was rooted in ageism, right? And so every compliment that he paid the younger people was an underhanded compliment. And they might not have known because they might not know what he does Monday through Friday and says on television. And because they were there for a summer event. But I'm very familiar with him and familiar with the way that he speaks of my generation, and he is indicative of why, like I said, nobody groomed their successors. You can't look behind you and see nothing but inferiority because that person doesn't have the same experiences or aren't as old as you, and not be willing to teach them. What good is the critique if you're not going to do anything to repair? So Catalina, we have.
I trust you to take the ball. If God called me home today, I trust you to take the ball. You're not going to say, we already know that, you're not going to say what anybody else wants you to say, but I trust you to take the ball
I
and hold these
appreciate that.
people accountable. Black, white, Democrat, Republican, Baltimore City, Baltimore County. Because truth be told, one of the isms in our community is that I don't know what you call it, but the people that live on the other side of the Beltway kind of look down their funky noses at people inside the
Tribalism.
Beltway when their grandmother lived right next door to us. You know what I mean?
Right. You know,
Go figure.
I tell
I'm taking
people
care
all
of
the
your
time,
grandmother, but you look down your nose at me.
yeah, because there's supposed to be some virtue or value added if you got away from your beginning. But I think that's the beginning of how you lose who you are. You know, how do you know?
Integration is the culprit.
Yes. Had I been alive during that part of our battle, I probably would still be just as unpopular as I am now. And that I ain't never wanted to sit next to no white folks that bad that I would have been doing all of that. What I would have wanted was equity in how services are rendered. I didn't need integration. That's not what we needed. Black children did better in school when taught by Black people. Black business did better when we had no option but to have to support our own. I mean, look where we've come to. Now we beg people to support Black business. We run ad campaigns on the radio and television about spending Black and making it it shouldn't even be a campaign. We shouldn't have to beg our own people to support us. But how did we get here? We overvalue access to white money, access to white spaces. It taught another generation that there's value in white spaces and less than in ours. We might not have meant to, but that was the underlying message when we made it so important to be able to be where white folks are at.
That's why it is so special to have you on this show. This is Black media.
Yes.
And absolutely. You can say whatever you want. We're not going to give you a script to read. We don't want that. We want you to speak unapologetically, Catalina Byrd. Yeah. By the way, this show is being broadcast in the metaverse. So if you go and get your son's Oculus goggles, I know he has a pair, and you took him away when he went away to college, you can see this show now in this old virtual reality world. Big ups to Dr. Tyrone Taborn.
Yeah, I'm aware. I'm aware. The Oculus gives me a headache, but yes, he does have he does have the headset, and I do know that we are leaning very much into this AI and virtual reality world. I caution that we don't allow that to make us any more desensitized than we already are. That's a very isolated existence. It's a very isolated experience and existence, and like where we started the show off with all of these young people committing suicide. Guard your spirit. Make sure that while you are in the metaverse, make sure you step outside and you're walking down the street, you're talking to people, you're touching people. I know it's a pandemic, so do so safely, wear your mask, put some gloves on, but don't allow yourself to become so desensitized that it becomes okay to be disconnected, because I'm really concerned for where we're going, not just as Black people, but humanity overall, as we lean more into the manufactured universe, so not to have to deal with the one that we're really in.
Catalina Byrd, how come you never became a model? I've seen your natural afro and it rivaled Angela Davis. Did you ever delve into the realm of beauty?
In high school, I did model in hair shows. My Aunt Claudia, who passed away 2 years ago, owned Main Attraction Hair Salon on Park and Mulberry. But I'm only 5'1", and so for all the years that I've known Mr. Travis, I never made the height requirement to walk or be one of his girls. But I did do some hair shows in high school for my aunt's salon. But they want you to at least be 5'6".
Well, maybe you need to do a show just for people under 5'6". We need to change the Didn't you just say we need to dismiss those norms? I mean, speaking of fashion, any thoughts on men in skinny jeans or with their pants falling off of their buttocks.
That has been a fascinating thing to watch evolve. I watch men's pants get smaller and smaller, and yet they still can fall off. And one would think the tighter the pant, the more attached to the hip it would be.
I saw a cat trying to run from the police with his pants down around his knees. He was running in slow motion, and they caught him within 20 steps.
You know, I remember when I was coming up, my mother thinking that the things that I wore were ridiculous. And so I just try to be open to letting everybody express themselves the way that they want to.
Okay. Does that include today's music? Because I call it mumble rap. A lot of us old heads call it mumble rap. I hear Future talking about the lean, the lean. Is the young rapper promoting drinking Robitussin?
Yeah. And it's really, really.
And it's made it on mainstream. When I saw him on Saturday Night Live, I'm saying to myself, what's wrong with these people?
But it didn't start with them. Again, they were influenced. I remember 3 6 Mafia being the first mainstream rappers that I heard talking about lean and glorifying lean. I didn't know what lean was. You know, we're not from that region of the South where that's a thing. And Baltimore
time out. They drank Robitussin very well in Baltimore.
They do now, but it's been glorified through hip hop culture.
No, lady. When I was a teenager, they were drinking
Robitussin, y'all was doing things we wasn't doing.
They were popping. I didn't say I did. I'm not taking that charge. They were also eating Dortons. Those were horse tranquilizers. Dortons and Sticky. That's what they called it.
Okay. Well, that might be the beginning of the of where that happened. But I watched this documentary. I don't know if you're familiar with the artist Juice WRLD on HBO Max, and I just remember being heartbroken. I mean, he OD'd right before his 21st birthday, but this child was high for all 2 years that they were filming this documentary, from 19 to what would have been his 21st birthday. And he said, and we've talked about it in other contexts, he'd been on drugs since he was 8 years old because they put him on drugs for ADHD.
Ritalin.
And so he'd been on Ritalin. And it was a progression from there. You know, we've had whole campaigns about marijuana being a gateway drug, but what are the underlying impacts of over medicating these children because they don't behave the way we want them to in a classroom?
Cat Williams joked about it, but it was very serious. Remember?
It's very serious. It's very serious. And it took this young man's life from age 8 to 21 to have never known what it is to be sober. What is that impact on a family? What is that impact on the people around? And then looking at the documentary, you see so many people around him that were clearly there for the wealth and the access to the drugs and not him. It was very disheartening. And I only knew of his music because of my son. So after I watched the documentary, I was very intentional about calling my son and having a conversation about, what do you do when you don't feel happy? What do you do when you feel hopeless? Do you feel hopeless? Let's have a conversation about what you're feeling and how you process that. Because that was one of the most heartbreaking things in the documentary, is that this child's mother didn't know how much pain he was in. She didn't listen to his music. She thought it was, for a different generation. And in every song, he's talking about drugs and being high and being numb. And if she had just listened to one of his songs and not been afraid to feel like she was judging him and had a conversation with her son, maybe this child could still be here. Talented child, but clearly haunted by something that was much bigger than himself. And so, I just want people to just pay attention to your children. Don't think because you're a good person that necessarily means that it has a trickle-down effect. Like I said, Regina King's son just committed suicide. I can't begin to imagine how she feels as a mother who believed that she had a tight, strong knit relationship with her son to not know he was in that much pain. And that's what this child's mother didn't know, is that he was in that much pain. We, in this day and age, we have to, even at the risk of being, I guess, being alienated for overloving, pour into your kids. Make sure that they are doing okay inside, not material things. Check on their spirit, check on their heart. Make sure you know what motivates them and what they care about, because it's hard enough being Black in America. But I think that this generation has a lot that they were ill prepared to process, that they're also encountering, and a pandemic on top. And if I am truly an elder, then that's what I would rather be to the people coming behind me, as a resource of support and guidance, and strength. Where did Doni go? He'll be back. But allow me to take this time in his absence. I think we'd be remiss if I didn't thank you for tuning in to Be More News this morning. I see that there are a number of sponsors that scroll across the bottom, and Doni, of course, appreciates your support for this program, as well as the other programs that he's hosted over the years, as well as the website and the publication and the articles. We have about 4 minutes left in the show. I'm going to stay in the event that Doni's able to reconnect. I can see your comments when you post them. So if there's anything that you'd like to ask me or revisit that I've already said in these last 4 minutes before we get ready to close out this broadcast, by all means, feel free to put it in the comments section and I'll happily answer it. Also, if you get to this after we were live, I am myself on all platforms. I'm in Facebook jail, as Doni told you. So don't talk to me there just yet. I've got about 2.5 more weeks before I'm released from there. But you can find me on Twitter. Well, hello there. How are you?
Hey, how are you doing, Catalina? How things going?
I'm doing well. I was just keeping it going.
Oh, no problem. I'm sitting here listening to y'all. I'm getting all excited because, the day I'm coming through, I'm talking about working while Black. And so I have the I Can lady, Shannon Battle, coming through the show in about 3 minutes. And we're going to talk about working while Black, especially because right now we got a big thing going on with SCOTUS where Republicans and some conservatives, again, I know that's your people, but they're losing their mind over this idea that a Black woman can be Supreme Court justice. Like everyone has lost their mind. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit today, especially because guess what? We got to be Black at work. I tried to not be Black at work before. And honestly, real talk, I was, we might even talk about that a little bit more when I was the magical Negro.
So if you wasn't Black at work, what were you?
Oh, I was the magical Negro. I was more than Black. Oh. I was special because they told me I was special. They used to take me places and I was smart and all those things. And I bought into it. I absolutely did. I started believing that I'm special. I'm not like the rest. And didn't even realize that I was being a pawn in the subjugation of other people. I thought it was a flex when people were like, you should be more like William. And I was like, oh.
Bless your heart. I'm happy that you've since come to the realization that there is no such thing and that you were Black at work each and every day. And I promise you, I've watched other Black folks come to Jesus moment happen over the years.
Yeah.
I remember when the RNC taught Michael Steele he was Black while he was chairman. I believe we're going to see something like that happen in this Attorney General's race. But you stay tuned and wait for it.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to jump off here because I'm about to go on my show in just a minute. I just wanted to stop and let you all know that if you all listen to this incredible conversation about crime, justice, and Blackness, you might want to pull it on over and come holler at me in about 2 minutes. Well, all right.
We appreciate you. Doni, I'm happy you're back. I was just shouting out your sponsors and keeping the ball rolling as one does during technical difficulties. Another skill I learned from you.
I'm going to have to take Frank up. Frank told me to get T-Mobile internet, and I think I'm about done with Verizon. My name's Donnie Glover. I love you, Catalina Byrd. Thank you for being my friend. Thank you for
Thank
being
you.
patient with me, helping me to grow up, to be a better person.
Absolutely. Same to you. Thank you.
Y'all don't ever want Catalina Byrd. You never want to get on her bad side. You have a long time of trouble. Stay tuned. Thank you, Kat.
You're welcome.
Good morning, world.